Welcome to The Nation. I'm Rachel Smalley. They just keep coming. Yet more privacy breach revelations have emerged about the inquiry into the leaked GCSB report. Late on Friday afternoon, it was revealed the Parliamentary Service had forwarded emails between United Future leader Peter Dunne and Fairfax reporter Andrea Vance to the Henry inquiry. Within an hour of the file being sent, the Parliamentary Service recalled that email. It says the file was never opened. It was deleted. It's the latest development in a saga that's already revealed that Andrea Vance's phone records were sent to the inquiry, along with her parliamentary swipe card log. Peter Dunne, who resigned after refusing to release the contents of those emails to the inquiry, says it's a serious breach of privacy and he's now seeking legal advice. On Thursday, Geoff Thorn, the former military man who headed the Parliamentary Service, resigned. And now the opposition is calling for the resignation of the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, Wayne Eagleson. Let's take a moment now to recap some of the key events that have led to this situation. So, in late April, John Key's Chief of Staff, Wayne Eagleson, wrote to several ministers requesting they and their staff cooperate with the Henry inquiry. He also talked to the head of the Parliamentary Service, Geoff Thorn. As a result of that conversation, Eagleson then sent Mr Thorn an email requesting the Parliamentary Service provide ministerial records from photocopiers and any other relevant material that may be requested. Then, 3 weeks later, on May the 29th, a startling accusation from New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters. In a select committee, Peters said that Peter Dunne leaked the report. That was vehemently denied, of course, by both Mr Dunne and the Prime Minister.
Did you leak the report?
No.
So could it have been copied or anything?
Well, it's very difficult when it's in a locked briefcase in a house that I'm not in because I'm overseas at the time.
The following day, Winston Peters asked why the Henry inquiry was not requesting phone records from ministers and, in particular, he said, from Peter Dunne. But that same day, the Henry inquiry sent an email to the Parliamentary Service with a subject heading, Request for Ministers' Landline Call Logs. The email was seeking the call logs from ministerial phones to determine if certain ministers had called Andrea Vance's landline or mobile. But, and again, this is interesting, Peter Dunne's name is not on that list, so why wasn't it? The next day, May 31st, the inquiry emailed the following. Many thanks for this. Let's be clear. We did not request the second report you've attached here, i.e. the one showing all calls to and from the numbers of interest. We're not interested in looking at that. That second report presumably had all of Andrea Vance's phone records. But Mr Dunne tells a different story.
The only thing that I was asked to provide, or to give approval to provide, was my landline and desk phone calls and my swipe card access.
OK, so if they also had the email addresses you corresponded with and the records of your cell phone calls, how did they get that information?
I don't know the answer to that question. Mr Henry, when he first saw me on the 23rd of May, was able to tell me of the number of emails between Ms Vance and myself. On the 31st of May, when I met him again, he was able to tell me that he wanted access to my phone records because he wanted to compare those with Ms Vance's records,
Hold on a sec.
he said he didn't have.
OK, yeah, this is really confusing. You don't know how he got your cell phone records and your email metadata. You don't know how he got that.
They were clearly provided to him by the Parliamentary Service in some capacity or other. I don't know whether that was of their own volition or whether it was a result of a request from him or whether it was the result of some external instruction. All I know is that that material was provided and that my approval for that material being provided was never sought.
OK. I want to ask you what you feel about that in a moment. But first, what records of Andrea Vance's do you know and or believe they had?
I know that they had access to her phone records because, as I say, on the 31st of May, Mr Henry said he wanted access to my landline records for the purposes of comparison.
Yeah.
And the numbers he was seeking to compare calls to were her numbers. I know they had access to her swipe card records because he was able, as I say, for a particular day he wanted mine because he was wanting to test a theory that didn't prove to be correct, but he was then able to subsequently tell me about how our movements coincided on at least one other day.
Now, it's important to note what Peter Dunne says in that interview, that Mr Henry asked him for his own records so they could be compared with those of Andrea Vance. That clearly implies that Mr Henry already had Ms Vance's phone records and was intending to refer to them. Now, David Henry isn't resigning from this position. He put out a statement this week confirming he was sent Vance's records but didn't intend using them. We invited Mr Dunne onto the programme to discuss this. He said he wasn't available. But the question left hanging is that he and Mr Henry can't both be right. Either Mr Henry used Ms Vance's records, as Mr Dunne claims, or he didn't, as Mr Henry says in his statement. Now, our political editor, Patrick Gower, is with us now. Patrick, it's been a remarkable few weeks, hasn't it?
It certainly has. It's been quite a mess, and last night's dump of these emails just raises more and more questions. What we've got now, Rachel, is essentially 3 privacy breaches. The first one, as revealed last night, was that those email logs and the contents, the actual contents of Andrea Vance's emails were sent to the inquiry, something that she had not known about until late yesterday, just before the rest of the media and the rest of the New Zealand found out. Add on to that what we found out last night about those phone logs. They were actually sent not once by the contractor, as we had known, but by a senior Parliamentary Services staff member as well. So they were sent twice rather than once that we'd formerly known. And the third thing that we'd already known was that her swipe card access around Parliament was tracked. That was at the request of the Henry inquiry, but it was never in the final report. Andrea Vance and everyone else had to find out about that later on. So 3 levels of breaches, 3 levels of spying on Andrea Vance.
OK, and then late Friday afternoon, 130 pages of emails were released. What did we learn from the contents of that?
Yeah, well, pretty cynical dump, isn't it? You know, if something goes out at 4:30 p.m. on a Friday, they're trying to hide something. What we saw in that, to my mind, was just incompetence on a grand scale by Parliamentary Service, by the investigating body. It just looked like an absolute mess, and it looks like a cover-up, because all of these things that I've told you about were known all along by some very, very high levels, including the Chief Executive of the Department and Prime Minister and Cabinet, and they've tried to keep it quiet. They've been caught out, and it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing for the Prime Minister. He's been given some wrong information as well by the looks of things. But remember, this inquiry was in his name. These privacy breaches occurred under his name, essentially. This spying occurred under the name of John Key.
OK, specifically in these emails, what made you raise an eyebrow?
Yeah, it was just the complete casual disregard for privacy, the complete disregard for the role of the Fourth Estate around Parliament. It looked
and
like
so much clarification seemed to be being sought about what they could and couldn't access. It seemed a bit vague, really. Yeah,
it looked like they had no idea. It was very heavy-handed, but there was no clear rules about what was going on. It basically looked like, for want of a better description, a taxpayer-funded cowboy spying operation run by a bunch of loose units in Parliamentary Service and elsewhere.
All right, Patrick, I'll come back to you a little later in the programme.